You're listening to the University of Liverpool Podcast. I'm Neil Morrison. On today's show, Simon Capewell versus the soft drink industry. The public health researcher from the University of Liverpool zeroes in on the single biggest cause of obesity, sugar, especially sugary drinks. It's a David and Goliath fight, but then so is the battle over smoking and salt in our foods. And in those cases, David won. Simon Capewell hopes history will continue to repeat itself. That's coming up.
You're listening to the University of Liverpool Podcast, brought to you by the University of Liverpool online programs. Make a plan to advance your career today. Study a postgraduate degree with a world-class university without leaving your home or full-time job. You don't have to go far to go further.
Here's a little marketing trick. Let's say you are the manufacturer of a drink that has an image problem. Public health researchers are going on and on about how your drink is contributing to a major health crisis. Legislators are thinking about new laws to limit the sale of your drink. People are beginning to get it in their heads that your drink, your sweet, refreshing, delicious drink, is bad for their health. So what do? Well, one little marketing trick you can try is to find the healthiest people on the planet. I mean the healthiest people, as in superhuman health, Olympic level health. Find a time when everyone is watching those people. Now attach your drink's name to them. This is what Coca-Cola, for example, has done in the past 2 Summer Olympics. In this Coke commercial for the Games in Rio, there are quick shots of divers, gymnasts, and a pole vaulter, and then a fresh bottle of Coke. And then various athletes and everyday people dance and celebrate and kiss, all with a Coke in hand.
This is Olympic class manipulation.
Simon Capewell is a professor of clinical epidemiology at the University of Liverpool. He's been fighting to limit the amount of sugar in people's diets for years. He watched these ads on TV during the last Olympics, and he admits they even worked on him. His initial reaction was,
wow, I mean, it's such a short advert, but the professionalism, the way they capture the excitement of the games, the joy of being alive, the fun of drinking Coca-Cola, it's all sort of merged together, integrated with genius.
But then the public health side of Simon's brain kicks in.
I'm not sure if it kicks in or if it just starts to drip in about, well, hang on, this is really so good and I'm a grown-up now and what's the agenda here and am I being manipulated? Shit, yes I am. And gosh, aren't they good?
I have to admit, I watched a lot of Olympics coverage. I'm a big fan of the games, and that means I must have seen a lot of these ads and ads like this. And the truth is, I don't remember any of them. They just seem to wash over me. And it's not surprising. We are swimming in a sea of advertising for junk food and sugary drinks. In fact, a new report from the Obesity Health Alliance found that junk food brands spent £143 million on advertising in the UK alone. That's nearly $190 million US. Let's put it another way. The junk food industry spends about £28 for every pound the UK government spends on its flagship healthy eating campaign. So, with all of that, is it any wonder that you just stop noticing it?
Well, I guess there will be a degree of fatigue. There will be a degree of desensitization for people who are exposed all the time. But again, the sad thing about the industry is they are monitoring purchasing by locality, by store, and they can run these ads at different times of the day. They can delay the onset in different cities, and they can look at changes in behavior. They can look at changes in purchasing in real time. So if Coke sales go up, Coke's consumption goes up within 12 hours of that advert, they know that's it. It's hit the gold seam. So Coke have a global revenue of over $50 billion a year, and they're spending 5 or 10% of that on marketing. Billions of dollars on marketing alone. You can see how important it is, and how very, very high class it is.
You were a cardiology clinician before you shifted towards public health.
Yeah.
So you were obviously focused on getting people to watch their cholesterol, stop smoking. And was there a moment when you started to think, hold on here, what we really need to do is focus on obesity. We need to begin targeting obesity as much as these other problems?
Yes, certainly. As a cardiology clinician, and then as a public health academic, I gradually realized that the major burdens, the major causes of disease and death were poor diet and smoking, alcohol, physical inactivity. And of those, the poor diet is the strongest by far. What I discovered the hard way was trying to get that message across, and crucially trying to persuade legislators to improve diet on a national scale was almost impossible, because a healthy diet takes about 5 minutes to explain, and it takes a little bit longer to realize that the main problem with a healthy diet is not people's understanding. It's the fact that mostly they're consuming an unhealthy diet because that's the one that's cheap and accessible and socially acceptable. So getting all that across and getting change in society, I progressively realized was an impossible struggle. You need to go for short-term, simpler, achievable steps.
One example of this simpler, more focused approach is the Consensus Action on Salt and Health, or CASH. This group was set up by Professor Graham McGregor at the University of London in 1996. 22 expert scientists were part of the group. Professor Capewell was one of the expert scientific members of CASH. The group came about after the chief medical officer at the time refused to endorse recommendations to reduce salt intake. CASH responded by focusing relentlessly on the link between salt and cardiovascular disease.
And that was a substantial success. It was huge. So industry were persuaded to reduce the salt hidden in bread by about 40%, reduce the amount in ready meals and soups by 20%. So overall in the UK, adults and children are now consuming about 15% less salt than they were a decade ago. And this is one of the biggest reductions in the world. It's almost as good as Japan or Finland. And we have seen rapid falls in blood pressure. We can do the math. We know that's saving thousands of heart disease and stroke events, thousands of heart disease and stroke deaths every year on year.
The link is that clear.
Yeah. So research modeling that my group and myself have done over the last 2 decades, we've had publications in the New England Journal, Lancet, BMJ. Most recently in the BMJ, my colleague Graham McGregor did specific arithmetic on the salt reduction in the UK and estimated it was saving at least 5,000 heart disease and stroke deaths every year, 5,000 plus.
Okay, so let's return to obesity, which is the health issue that's being caused by sugar. How big of a health issue is obesity? For example, how does it compare to other causes of death, such as motor vehicle accidents or cancer?
Obesity is way bigger than injuries and deaths from motor vehicle accidents, or indeed all of violence, all of gunshot and homicide and things like that. So obesity is not only a major source of heart disease and stroke deaths. It explains maybe 20% of cancer deaths, maybe more. And This is not a feature recognized by many people. So it's very big. Not only is it big, but it's increasing. So over the last 3 decades, we've seen the proportion of people who are overweight or obese, in children, now a third of children by the age of 11 are overweight or obese. And then by middle age in the UK, 2/3 of adults are overweight or obese, 2/3, and rising. That's the problem. It's still going up.
And Simon Capel says the reason for this is very simple.
The single biggest driver is sugar. It's very easy to say that obesity reflects the excessive intake of calories, but calories is a diffuse area in terms of the science and behavior, and in terms of getting general public understanding, in terms of explaining it to politicians and policymakers and getting change, regulation and taxation. It's a slow burn. So sugars are a much easier first step. Sugar is very important. It represents 14-15% of energy intake in children and teenagers in the UK and the US. And that's at least 3 times higher than the level recommended by doctors and scientists. WHO, World Health Organization, for instance, recommend that we should all be consuming less than 5% of our total calories in the form of sugar, added sugars, refined sugars.
On the other hand, we are also leading increasingly sedentary lives. A research series in The Lancet was headlined "The Pandemic of Physical Inactivity." And there was a study out of Johns Hopkins University that found that on average, U.S. teens are as sedentary as a 60-year-old. So how much of this rise in obesity has to do with lack of exercise rather than just diet?
There's no question that lack of physical activity contributes to obesity. There's no question that being physically active is good for you and me and our families. It helps our mental health, strengthens our bones and muscles, helps us live longer, helps us feel more positive, gets our blood pressure down. All positives. I go jogging and hill walking. My family go swimming and go to the gym and things. But we think that the vast majority of the rise in obesity over the last 3 decades is about excess calorie intake, food, rather than inactivity. The bottom line is that most of the obesity we see in the UK and the US is because the industry has been very successful at marketing excess junk food and sugary drinks, and we've been very compliant and willing to consume that excess amount of calories.
It seems to me they've also been successful at creating confusion around this point. It's easy to find headlines that either ask which is to blame for the obesity crisis, lack of exercise or calories, or simply state that lack of exercise is to blame.
Yes, indeed. So the industry has been very clever in its use of denial tactics, in its strategy to confuse the general public, and so getting away from the hard science that it's mostly food calories that are the problem, they've been pushing the counter story that it's all about physical inactivity.
And is there much actual debate within the scientific world on the contribution that calories make relative to exercise, or is it settled that calories are the primary driver?
There is a very strong consensus across the scientific world that the dominant issue, the dominant driver for obesity is excess calories from junk food and sugary drinks. There is a minority, and this is interesting, there is a minority of scientists who vociferously assert that it's due to lack of physical activity. The difficulty there is that they do not have the evidence. They tend to cherry pick bits and pieces to back their statements. And also, when you make further examination, a lot of them are taking money from the food and drink industry. Now, it's bad enough when they take it publicly and declare it at the bottom of their papers. The reader, the editor, can then make a judgment as to whether he thinks that scientist is a little bit biased or extremely biased. The real difficulty comes when you have scientists standing up and stating that they're objective and neutral, but are secretly taking money and are pushing the industry message. And sadly, there are many examples of that.
One example of this is the not-for-profit group, the Global Energy Balance Network. This group described itself as a science-based solution to the obesity crisis. It was founded and led by prominent scientists of exercise, medicine, and public health, but the group was funded by Coca-Cola. Even the group's website was registered by Coke. Journalists quickly pulled apart the links between Coke and the Global Energy Balance Network, and less than a year after it was founded, it shut down. According to Simon Capewell, this attempt to create confusion on a subject where there is a lot of clarity is just one tactic of the sugary drink industry. A recent study in the American Journal of Preventive Medicine found that just 2 sugary drink companies, Pepsi and Coca-Cola, sponsored a total of 96 national health organizations in the US. This includes the American Diabetes Association, Harvard Medical School, and even the National Dental Association. They are also, of course, active at lobbying legislators. That same study in the American Journal of Preventive Medicine found that Pepsi and Coke lobbied against public health initiatives 97% of the time. And yet another tactic is to attack the messenger. In other words, discredit academics who want to reduce the amount of sugar in drinks and junk food.
One of the kind of rites of passage of being a public health advocate is the first time you get attacked either in Twitter, on social media, or one of the libertarian bloggers funded by the industry picks on you personally and calls you a Puritan or a zealot or what happened. So I will not grace them with their names, but there are 2 or 3 right-wing libertarians who write very angry blogs in the UK attacking anyone who attempts tobacco control, for instance, anyone who suggests that there should be a tax on sugary drinks, or indeed suggests that alcohol consumption should be reduced. The pattern is the same because industry funding tends to be broad, and these libertarian speakers tend to get money from all of those industries. So their tactics are very standardized. They will try and discredit the organization, whether it's ASH for smoking or cash for salt or action on sugar for sugary drinks. They'll try and fragment the public health community. They've been very successful at doing that with electronic cigarettes, for instance. They'll use the threat of legal action or actual litigation, and they will go at specific individuals.
Is it stressful when they come at you like that?
It is if you're not prepared. So the point of a community, the point of alliances, is that we induct colleagues and say if you're going to get into this game, particularly in terms of public messaging, then understand one of the key performance indicators is attack on you, and it could come in all sorts of ways. So there are legal ways they could try and get at your employers or whatever. So I'm very lucky here in the University of Liverpool. They are very supportive. So long as we chase the evidence, so long as we're scientific and evidence-based, they will back us all the way, because Liverpool University are very pro-public health, and they want to make the world a better place. But some others have employers who are more vulnerable to industry pressure or to political pressure.
So if you want to combat this, one of the ways of figuring out what's the best route for combating it would be to take a look at what the industry is most afraid of. And we're fortunate in that way, in that there was a leaked document from Coca-Cola Europe. What did they see as the greatest threat to their business?
This document was really great. So one of the employees from Coca-Cola Europe leaked a document on the public policy risk matrix and lobby focus. So what they were looking at was what are their threats to their future business, the business impact, and also the likelihood that these different things were going to happen. And then they put things into categories. So the things that were really going to hurt them in terms of nailing profits would be advertising restrictions for sweet beverages, and discriminatory nutrition labeling schemes or warning schemes, just like we get warning labels on packets of cigarettes, and all forms of taxation, basically. So that's what really worried them, the product taxes in member states. And very tellingly, having categorized these 50 different possible threats, they then put them into 3 groups: monitor, just keep an eye; prepare, in other words, this is probably going to happen, deal with it; and then fight back. So quotas, EU schemes for deposit things, taxation, warning labels, fight back, which is a very telling message. This is not a company that is focused on the health of its consumer. This is a company focused on maximizing profit for its shareholders, and it's going to use every legal tactic to try and oppose regulation and taxation, the 2 things that really scare them.
Out of that list of things that they were most afraid of, so taxation, labeling, regulation, if you got your pick of the things that should be brought in immediately to try to counter this, is that where you would focus?
Yeah, yes, indeed. We're very lucky because we have the lessons we've learnt from tobacco control and now with reducing alcohol consumption. And it's all around the 3 A's, the 3 A's of affordability, acceptability, and availability. You need to nail all of them. And when your grandfather, my grandfather, was smoking during the Second World War, that was 4 out of 5 men. Now less than 1 in 5 men smoke. And that's not a coincidence, and it's not any simple silver bullet has done it. There's been a progressive series of things around the price of cigarettes, around the acceptability of cigarettes, around the availability of cigarettes, that's progressively made it more and more difficult, less and less attractive to smoke. People still have the choice. That's not been taken away from them. And although the libertarians would claim otherwise, but the balance in society has shifted. Smoking is no longer cool. The day the smoke-free legislation came in, so that it was no longer acceptable to smoke in bars or pubs or cinemas or cafes, you had to stand outside. That was the day it stopped being socially normal and became abnormal. And so the same tactics are there for sugar. Sugary drinks need to be made more expensive. The affordability needs to be addressed. They need to be made less acceptable. So the general public needs to be informed about the potential harms of sugar, and this wall-to-wall marketing that buries our children in a torrent of advertising, that needs to be turned off. This is what happened with tobacco advertising, step by step by step. In the UK, we've won the battle in principle. Ofcom, the office responsible for looking at advertising and communications, agreed 10 years ago that children should be protected from marketing of junk food and sugary drinks. And these were banned in all TV programs aimed at children. The loophole was that they weren't banned in family programs. So if kids sit down and watch a soap opera or a reality TV or X Factor or something like that, then it's wall-to-wall advertising of junk food and sugary drinks. So at the very least, we need a watershed on TV before, say, 9 o'clock, so that the kids are protected during family viewing. TV is just the beginning. We've won the principle. We're just nailing the loopholes. The fact of life is that this is 2017. Kids spend a lot more time looking at screens. So it's all about the internet. It's all about advergaming. And so all the digital channels, where so much industry money is spent on marketing, they need to be nailed as well. So that children are protected, not just from tobacco advertising, but also advertising of junk food and sugary drinks.
How optimistic are you that, if you said that was the 1980s for tobacco, that's quite a while. So let's say 30, 40 years from now, that we'll be in the same place when it comes to sugary drinks and sugary food and processed food that we are with tobacco.
I'd like to suggest that instead of 30 or 40 years, we're looking at less than 10 years for the UK and the US, and a bit longer for some other countries. The reason I think we're going to get more rapid progress is because we've learnt the lessons. We've learnt the lessons from tobacco control. We know about the 3 A's of affordability, availability, and acceptability. We understand very well the dirty tricks, the tactics used by the multinational companies to try and block regulation, to try and block taxation. And so we are prepared. And as soon as they try and mount those arguments, as soon as they try those stratagems, they can be called out. They can be denounced as the deceptions they are.
Well, we can leave it on that hopeful note then. Thanks so much for speaking with us.
You're welcome.
Simon Capewell is the Chair of Clinical Epidemiology in the Department of Public Health and Policy at the University of Liverpool. We've done a few public health stories now. There's so much happening in the field. Makes for very interesting discussions. If you have an interest in public health, you should check out the University of Liverpool online Masters in Public Health. We'll put a link to it in the program notes. That's it for this episode of the University of Liverpool podcast. Don't forget to rate us in iTunes if you can. We'll be back in 2 weeks. I'm Neil Morrison.
You're listening to the University of Liverpool podcast, brought to you by the University of Liverpool online programs. Make a plan to advance your career today. Study a postgraduate degree with a world-class university without leaving your home or full-time job. You don't have to go far to go further.